to ask something. And they really do believe that their dreams or their wants comes true. They are not afraid to ask you because you are First Lady. And can you give me your recipe? How do you ask them to ask you something when they don't like to ask? And maybe they feel confused or not confused, they feel nervous about asking something.
Human dignity is very important. And as much as possible, I try to make sure that people are not embarrassed or offended in any encounter that we have. And so I'm proactively always asking what it is that I can do to help and how can I help alleviate some of their hardships. And I always say to them, you're not asking, I'm the one who's asking. It's my job to ask. It's my duty to ask. And in that way I hope that I can encourage them or help them to be more forthcoming.
And the following question about safety. So we accompanied you in Syrian Trust in Development, and we also accompanied you on the way to this center, and you drive by yourself. Why do you allow this risk?
Very simply, I refuse to live in fear, Anna. Everybody in Syria, you could say, is at risk today. So why should I be any different? More importantly, how can I encourage people to continue living their lives, going to work and sending their children to school, if I don't do the same? That would be hypocritical. But to be honest, the greater risk for me personally is to be isolated from day-to-day life, because ultimately there is no substitute for being directly engaged on the ground.
And your way to Esoelia? We know that one piece of this route was greatly dangerous because from the one side there was territory that is under Daesh control, from the other side they're also under terror control. So why? For us it's incredibly that you drove. I saw by my eyes you drove alone in your car.
I do appreciate your concern. But from my perspective, these are Syrian women, mothers and daughters, each in their own way trying to deal with the hardships that have been brought about by this war. And crisis or no crisis, my interest is always to extend help to those who need it. And this is a priority above all other considerations. I continue to insist that I remain as accessible and approachable as possible, because again, there is no replacement for human interaction. It's how I learn and it's how I'm able to make a difference.
You're constantly exploring the country despite this risk, and you met with the people a lot. And what mood do you meet? What do they talk about? What do they ask you?
Conversations vary. There are stories of courage and resilience, stories of tragedy and hope, but always the bigger question on everybody's mind is when will Syria be safe again? When can we go home?
Since the first meeting with Mr. President and after all these years you are together, is he the same person as you once decided to marry?
In many ways, yes. He is the same person I met before he became president. He's very calm. He's very thoughtful and always polite. But probably one of the best things about him is that he is so easy to talk to. You can talk to him about anything and everything, and that's great.
And how does difficult military tasks or other difficulties of nowadays influenced him?
Well, of course, the responsibilities are much greater than before. The burden is tremendous, and that is where all his energy is focused and the majority of his time. But one of the things I admire as well about him is that despite these burdens and the demanding schedule that he has, he always tries to make some time for his family, especially our 3 young children. He takes his role as a father very, very seriously. He's a very giving man.
Mm-hmm. And what about you? What principally changed in you during these difficult times?
I'm no different to many other people in Syria, Anna. My family has been affected just as any other family in Syria. We are constantly moved and saddened by the tragedies that this country faces on a daily basis. And after 5 years of war, I think it goes without saying that in every home in Syria, there is a sadness that pervades, and ours is no different.
And how did your family cope with the tragic loss? I mean, brother-in-law of Mr. President.
Well, as all families cope, there is not a family in Syria that has not lost a loved one. Today, parents are attending the funerals of their children rather than their weddings. Grandparents are having to come out of retirement to help care for their grandchildren. And the number of single-parent families multiplies every single day. Some have lost 4, 5, 6 or more members. And that is a huge burden on the whole of society. So when you put our loss into perspective, it's by no means unique, and it doesn't deserve to be singled out. We cope. How do other people cope? We persevere, we continue.
Okay, the day when the Ministry of Defense was attacked, do you remember this day? Both you and Mr. President continue with your agenda, and what was more surprisingly for us, that you take your children to the school. Why? It's once again I have to ask the question about the risk.
The incident you refer to was in 2012, so quite early on in the crisis. At the time, my eldest was 10 and the youngest was no more than 7. So understandably, they were all frightened. The sound of gunfire was very close by. But the morning of that attack, I knew that this was going to be one of the most profound moments of their childhood. My instinct at the time, and I remember the day very vividly, as if it was yesterday. My instinct at the time was definitely not to run or to hide. And when I called the school and was told that they were open as usual, the decision was made. As I was walking my children to school, my youngest asked me whether I loved him. But let me tell you that I walked my children to school that day, not because I wanted to put them at risk, but because I wanted them to know what it meant to face down